All right, so good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, and we do have a few newbies today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Now, September and October were a little crazy. I think we did total over 120 broadcasts in 2 months, which is crazy even by our standards. So thank you so much, whether you were joining us live or on YouTube, as we continue to showcase and celebrate such amazing people and places around the globe. This is my first broadcast of November. Joe got me beat a little earlier today with Mia, and so welcome into a new exciting month. We've got all sorts of great stuff on the go. Before I dive in with today's speaker, I did want to highlight that the Gardner Foundation is making this entire month of events possible. They have been so great with us over the last few years, doing over 15 programs. You can check out all those sessions on our YouTube channel at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, and look for more to come in our newsletter. Now, today I'm really excited because I am reunited with an old friend for today's broadcast, someone that I've wanted to have in for a couple of years now, Dr. Tammara Soma. So she is at SFU, Simon Fraser University out in Vancouver, British Columbia. She's an assistant professor there, but more importantly, she is the research director of the Food Systems Lab, where today she's going to draw upon a career of expertise in food management, food security, and so much more, in highlighting the steps that we can do to prevent the global food or zombie apocalypse. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Soma. She's going to blow your mind for the next 20 minutes, and I'm so excited for your questions live and on YouTube. Dr. Soma, thank you so much for joining me again.
Hi, Jesse. I'm so excited to be here today.
So nice to have you, and I'm thrilled to dive into your talk.
Awesome. You can probably hear from my very hyperactive voice that I'm so excited to meet the students. So hello, everyone. I'm calling in from Burnaby Mountain, located on the ancestral territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations here in British Columbia, Canada. If you've never been, I really hope that you come and visit. So thank you all for coming today to hear my presentation on the 6 steps you can take to prevent the global the global food apocalypse. But by the way, did you make sure to close the doors in your school? It's so important to close the doors because you know what? Zombies' favorite spots are schools. You know why? Because schools are the perfect place for the smartest, biggest, juiciest brains ever. Yummy. Just kidding. And by the way, this is not a real brain. This is a red velvet cake. And you can watch this episode on how to make a brain cake on YouTube, How to Cake It by Yolanda. By the way, since we've just met, you can call me Dr. T. So I work at Simon Fraser University at the School of Resource and Environmental Management. I teach food system planning and I do research on food. I study waste. Here you can see the picture of me with this mask and mucking around with garbage. I'm also working on a project for food in space, and I also get inspiration for my lectures from Netflix. You probably know about Netflix. Now, listen, I really hate horror movies. Hate it. But the zombie and food apocalypse connection started with an innocent game called Plants vs. Zombies. I don't know how many of you have played Plants vs. Zombies. I mean, what can be better than cute fruits and vegetables destroying the evil zombie force that tries to eat knowledge, that tries to eat the brains? So this game is perfect. So playing Plants vs. Zombies got me a little bit more brave, and then I started to get more interested in some zombie movies. Thank you, Netflix. And so that's when I noticed something really relevant to food. This is interesting. So here's the thing. I noticed that when I was watching all of these different movies, there's this recurring pattern in zombie or in apocalypse movies. And the number one pattern is that the most important thing for all of the actors in all of the movies is for them to survive, they need to access food. In fact, a lot of the adventure is around them trying to get food in grocery stores. But the thing is, every time they're trying to get food, zombies are waiting in the grocery store, waiting to eat the main characters. That's definitely not good when you're trying to go grocery shopping. So when I watch these movies, it's kind of a reminder that sometimes we take food for granted. But if there was a big earthquake or a major disaster, and even now during the COVID pandemic, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a point when grocery stores were actually quite bare. They were quite empty. So we can't just take it for granted. You know, the thing is, our entire existence, our entire survival depends not only on food that we get from the grocery store, but also the all of the systems that help us grow food. So the land, the water, the biodiversity, all of the systems are so important to make sure that we can actually grow food. So the fact is, we don't really need a zombie movie for people to realize that we really do need to prepare for a good food system, but also to prepare for food emergencies. But you know what? Sometimes scientists actually use the zombie metaphor, and this is serious scientists in different parts of the world. They actually use the zombie metaphor when trying to get people excited and engaged to plan for emergencies. So in the United States, the Center for Disease Control has all kinds of zombie materials to raise awareness about the importance of emergency preparedness. So the idea is like, okay, if there was a zombie, what kind of emergency kit will you prepare? And these are resources that's available in the United States. But the thing is, whether it be zombies, earthquakes, wildfires, hurricane, global pandemic, everything boils down to our survival, and our survival depends on our ability to eat, to get food. So let's talk about the food apocalypse, okay? Is it happening? Will it happen? What's going to happen? Let's talk about it. So, what's important to remember is that basically, if you want to prepare, there are two steps that you need to consider. The first is prevention and then also preparing, just in case there's an issue. So, we can avoid a major food apocalypse if we focus on building the strength and the capacity of long term food system resiliency. So, our food system needs to be strong so that we can prevent a food apocalypse. But at the short term, we also need to be prepared in case there's an emergency, like a wildfire or a hurricane or a natural disaster. So we need to prepare for food for short-term emergency. Now, when I talk about food emergencies or crisis, before the pandemic, people would just not think about it. They're like, "Oh, why are you worrying about the food apocalypse, or why are you worrying about a food crisis?" I actually had to convince people that this scenario is not only a possibility, but it's also inevitable. So it means that it can happen if we don't change the way that we do things. So I don't know if many of you have heard about a scenario called the perfect storm. So the perfect storm is a scenario of increasing food insecurity, okay? So hunger, increasing hunger, coupled with increasing water scarcity. So you see a picture of a desert there, right? So less water in general. And then also an increasing energy instability, issues with the cost of gas going up, energy and fossil fuels, and which will lead to more conflict that will potentially lead to a larger global refugee crisis and mass migration. And if we're not careful, this all can lead to a global war. Okay, that's a scary picture. We don't want that to happen. But the thing is, this perfect storm scenario is not a science fiction scenario. It's not like zombies. Zombies are science fiction, okay? Even though some people might think it's real, but it's science fiction. But this scenario is so important because, according to the scientist in the UK, Sir Beddington, the perfect storm scenario will happen by 2030. So, basically, in 9 more years, if we don't change our ways. So, to prevent this from happening, Dr. Beddington said that we need to produce 50% more food, we need 50% more energy, and 30% more water to feed a growing 9 billion people. But I'm saying, hold on, wait a second. Okay, do we need to grow 50% more food? How about this? Right now, we actually grow more than enough food to feed 10 to 12 billion people, but between 30 to 50% of food that is grown around the world is wasted. So we grow so much food, but then we waste it. So this is to the tune of $1 trillion. And in Canada, 4.4 million Canadians are food insecure. So this is very, very contradictory. So, in a nutshell, if you think about it, with all of the things, with all of the problems around food waste and food insecurity, the food apocalypse is already happening in so many places. And so food apocalypse can happen because of political problems. So, for example, in Venezuela, there is a massive food crisis happening. And the thing is, the country's climate is very tropical. So, in Venezuela, you can grow lots of different food year round, not like in parts of Canada where it's very cold, so you can't grow all year round. But the thing is, the country didn't really plan for a food crisis, so people relied so much on imported foods from supermarkets. And when supermarket shelves became empty, there was not enough food grown locally to support the population. And then, in addition to food crisis and supermarkets, we also have this pollinator crisis where many insects are dying, including bees. So as far as important species go, bees are on the top of the list. They are critical pollinators. They pollinate around 70 out of 100 crop species that feed 90% of the world, and bees are responsible for $30 billion a year worth of food production in crops. So if pollinators keep on dying from pesticides, diseases, and lack of biodiversity, our supermarkets basically would have half the amounts of fruits and vegetables, and this will definitely bring on a food apocalypse. Also, if we keep on relying too much on food from other countries and we don't strengthen and support our local food system, if the borders were closed, not because of a zombie, attack, but because it's closed because of a hurricane or a disaster, there are often issues with supply chain. And it was estimated that there will only be 3 days worth of food in many big cities like Toronto, Vancouver, for example. So this is why I need all of us, all of you, to come up with a plan, okay? So there's hope, there's a strategy here. Now, there are 6 steps we can take to prevent a food apocalypse. The first step is seed saving. The second is zero food waste. The third is identifying food assets. The fourth is grow food everywhere. The fifth step is polyculture. And the sixth step is build closed loop cities. Okay, so let's start with step number 1. So step number 1, remember in the zombie movie, the zombies are in the grocery stores and whatever, map out your nearest food asset. So food asset map is a way for you to basically identify where are all of the important places in my city where we can get food. It can be restaurants, it can be grocery stores, it can be community gardens, it can be lots of different places. So in order to be prepared, you need to know what's there so you can also identify, oh, we actually don't have a lot of food assets in this neighborhood. So we need to build up and strengthen up the food asset in these neighborhoods. So here's an example of my lab working with community members in Vancouver, and we were identifying the different food assets in the city and also showcasing places where it needs more support. And this is something that all of you can do in your schools and just try it out. It's really fun. The next step is seed saving. So seed saving is really important. I remember when I was in Toronto, there was a seed saving library in different public libraries. And if you've ever watched the movie The Martian, the only reason why the character Matt Damon survived is because he saved potato seeds. So potato seeds were in his space shuttle, and he was able to grow it with his, you know what he grew it with? He grew it with his number 2 as a soil, in Mars. So that's really important. Now, it's not just me that's worried about seed saving, but in fact, scientists from around the world have actually been saving seeds in the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, which is located in the Norwegian island of Spitsbergen. And this is a remote Arctic archipelago. And so it's cold, it's very cold there. And that's why they've decided to keep all of the seeds there. In the case that there's a global massive disaster, they can bring back the seeds and regrow the food, right? So this is really important. So you might want to consider to start saving seeds at your home or your community garden, or maybe even your school. Now, strategy number 3 is zero food waste. Use every single ingredient. So when I think of corn, for example, corn can be used so many different ways. Not just eat it as corn in the cob, but even the husk can be used to wrap as a food packaging, to use as dolls. The cob can be used for soup. And also, this is this corn that looks like it's been infected like a zombie. This corn actually has a fungus, and this type of mushroom is really good, and it's a delicacy for Mexican dishes. It's called huitlacoche. So the thing is, we have to be more creative. We can think about how can we use different parts of the food so we don't waste, and that's good. Now, strategy number 4 about growing food everywhere. I really mean it. If you have a balcony and an apartment, grow food there. Think about investing get your city or your state to think about how can we invest in vertical agriculture. In the picture there on the slide, you'll see like rows and rows of vegetables. That's actually not on the land. That's actually on a rooftop. So if your city is really urban with lots of skyscrapers, there are also buildings that is conducive for actually building rooftop gardens, which is very important. And then the fifth strategy is polyculture. So you can see that when there's a monoculture and everything is the same, if there is one pest or one disease or one particular type of weed, it's very easy for all of the crops to die. But if you have polyculture, and you see the picture on the other side where it's very colorful, there's lots of different plants and vegetables, that's a harder way for the pest to attack because you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket. And then strategy number 6, last strategy, is building closed loop cities. So building closed loop cities, it's really, really cool because the idea is that you can make sure that there's places to grow food in your city. There's places to manage the food waste and make it into compost in your city. There's places where you can process the food. So basically, it's very close to one another. And then therefore, you're not relying on very long distance supply chain, which it can be disrupted, especially during emergencies. Okay, so I want you to think, I have a mission for you, okay? You can save the world, but you can't save the world alone. So we need to work together. So you remember that scientist Beddington's projection is that by 2050, in a world of over 9 billion people, we will be faced with a food apocalypse of epic proportion if we don't change things. And so the world needs your help. Superman, Wonder Woman, you name it, Black Panther. So things you can do. I want you to think about a novel idea to prevent to prevent a food apocalypse or to survive during a food apocalypse using any of the core strategies mentioned, but give it your own twist. And I'd really, really love to hear your ideas, especially if you maybe can tweet it to me, if you're allowed to have Twitter, or if you can ask your parents or your teachers to tweet it to me and share it. I would really love to hear your take and hear from you. I'm sure you have lots of ideas. And finally, I'm always happy to get emails, to get messages, to connect with everyone from all across North America and the world. And so if you want to keep in touch, if you want to eventually study at Simon Fraser University, you can email me here at Tammara_Soma@sfu.ca. And also, I have this website that I'm part of. It's called cec.org Food Matters Action Kit. If you are very interested in addressing food waste, like I am, I'm always measuring food waste. So please do check out this Food Matters Action Kit on cec.org. There are hundreds of activities that you and your schools can do, and you also get badges for participation. So thank you again for participating. I'm very happy that we had a chance to connect today, and I'm open for questions.
Fantastic, Tammara. That was awesome. Thank you so much for such a rapid fire presentation. We covered so much ground so quickly. We've got folks in Canada, the US, we've got the SDG Warriors joining from India on YouTube, which is really exciting. So nice international audience of classrooms. And so guys, I'd love you guys to get your questions ready. If you're on YouTube, feel free to share in the chat bar. We've got a whole bunch of groups from across Ontario too. So share those questions away. And then live classes will come to you guys all in a minute. Just put on those thinking caps over the next few seconds. So our first two questions, and by the way, if you can't see us, feel free to exit your screen share, come back to live with us and go right ahead and do that. But our SDG Warriors, or our Indian classroom, wants to know if, worst case scenario, we end up in a really bad food situation globally, is there a food item that's the most likely to survive?
Ooh, most likely to survive. There are so many different types of food items. In the army, they actually have these bars that could last for years. They're hard as a rock, but you can survive with it. In Canada, the indigenous communities actually have this food called pemmican, which is made a mix of berries and then some meat fat and some of the buffalo meat, and that will last for a long time. So anything that lasts for a long time. I actually, in my house, I store a lot of beans, like hard beans, like lentils. So if this question is from India, I'm sure you like to eat dal. potentially. So I like to eat dal. I save lentils and chickpeas and beans because they're very easy. They last for a very long time. So you might want to do a mix of like food that you have to cook, like lentils, so they last a long time, and also mix of foods that are in can. Peanut butter also lasts for a long time. So there's lots of different options, and it's really based on what you like. But there's also emergency kits that you can purchase online of like food that will last, that has a very long shelf life.
Yeah. Fantastic. I love dal too, and I'm here in Canada just like you. So if I could have grabbed my lentils while you were talking about it, I would have. Before we go to our first class, Mr. Sinclair's group joining us live, I just want to highlight Miss Nagel's class is highlighting all sorts of great solutions. So way to go to Ava and Alexa and Maya for talking about some of the things that they would do. Grow flowers, veggies, and fruit this spring so she can save bees and mosquitoes. Join grandparents and grow stuff in the garden. So I'm so glad there's like this movement to get people out in the garden. A lot of us have backyards. Maybe we're in an apartment building. We have community garden space. Those things can go a long way. On my balcony, I have a bunch of food that I've been using all year long. Tomatoes, basil, all sorts of stuff that, add to your ability to grow your own food. It's a really exciting opportunity. Tammara, sorry, you look like you have something to say.
No, that's great. And also, I live in a condo, so I actually don't have I don't have a backyard or anything like that to grow food. But I joined a community garden, and I have a garden box at Simon Fraser University, and we have lettuce and all of that good stuff. And because Canada is a bit, it's not a bit cold, it's a lot cold. But what I've done with my garden colleagues is we created hoop houses with like this plastic hoop houses, and that way it creates like this little greenhouse effect, and this makes it so that we can grow all throughout for longer.
Yeah, thank you for giving us the one good version of a greenhouse effect we've had in all our broadcasts. A lot of climate programs. Mr. Sinclair joining us where we all wish we were, in San Jose, California. Welcome in, guys, and yeah, go for it. Hi.
Sorry, middle of typing something up. Question is regarding what can you tell us about food deserts in major urban cities?
Yes, definitely. There are so many different words used for food deserts. There's food swamps, there's food oasis, there's food apartheid. But the thing with food desert is the idea that there are communities and spaces in a neighborhood where if there are foods, the foods that are there are not necessarily healthy for people. So it might be a lot of fast food, it might be a lot of junk food, and not very many grocery stores. Now all of that is it's really, so I'm a food system planner, I'm a planner, so we're very interested in issues like that and making sure that all communities have access to fresh food, healthy food. And the thing is, sometimes people think, okay, well, the solution is let's just build a grocery store. But the thing with just building a grocery store is that it really has to do with income. So in a place with a food desert, just because there are healthy foods available, it doesn't mean that people can actually afford it. So in places where it's not a food desert, if low-income community members live there, they still can't access it. So really, a lot of the issue is around income and being able to access food. So that's a lot of what we work with. It's like, how can we actually improve income so that people can access food in general?
Yep. Fantastic question, guys. Let's head to another live class. St. Agnes School, 7/8 joining us in Waterloo. If you guys have one, come on up, unmute your mic, turn on your camera, get all those devices going, and you're all set to go. While you guys are getting that ready, there we are. Hey, St. Agnes. Thanks for all the great YouTube questions, everybody. This is great.
Okay, so we have a question here.
Will animals be affected by the food apocalypse?
Absolutely. Right now, I mentioned that the pollinators are already impacted by the food apocalypse, and also in terms of the food crisis, when we think about water scarcity, so drought, the issues of drought, for example, that really does impact animals. With wildfires, if you've seen the case in Australia, the koala bears, the kangaroos, like so many animals have died because of that. So the whole thing about the food apocalypse or the food crisis is a bigger issue. It's climate change issue, it's biodiversity issue. So really, when I think about how can we solve the food apocalypse, how can we solve the food crisis, that's also like we are also in a way indirectly trying to help biodiversity, trying to help animals. So it's like all around. Thank you for that question.
It's a great question. I'm so glad it got brought up because, I mean, a lot of the time, certainly when we were growing up, you know, it was always painted as like animals versus people. And really, it's all of us together. If we focus on these solutions just jointly globally, we can really have a positive impact in a lot of realms. I really encourage all our students watching today, if you want to check out a great follow-up on this, if you're interested in pollinators and animals, Peter Soroyi has joined us talking about bees and climate change and pollinators and food from that. Just some really fantastic broadcasts on our YouTube channel. All right, let's head to Davis 7-8. I know we didn't get a chance to test, but hopefully your mic's on. Hello, guys. Maybe. Yes, I can hear you.
Here.
Maybe.
Hello there.
There we are. Hi.
Hello.
Hello from Fraser. We're happy to see that almost half of our class are growing food at home. So that's good news over here at Davis. We have Caleb that has a question.
Hi, Caleb.
What type of food will be most affected by the food apocalypse?
What type of food will be most affected by the food apocalypse? Well, you know, the thing is when, you know how I showed in the picture, the polyculture and the monoculture. So when we grow one type of food like corn and wheat, for example, when we do that, it's very easy for these crops to just die when there's a problem, right? So that's why we want to kind of not put all of our eggs in one basket and try to plant diverse type of foods. I think that the food that will be stronger in a food apocalypse are foods that have that they're kind of like they're grown locally, so they have a very strong their seeds. The seeds is very strong. It is suited for local conditions. So you want to try to see if you can get some heritage seeds, for example, that's local, you know, that is indigenous to your space. So that's always a good thing. And one thing also, it really depends on the type of natural disaster. So for example, if you have a wildfire, that really impacts like orchards, like apples and peach orchards, that impacts them more than other types of fruits and vegetables. So another thing that you might think about is in your city or in your state or your province, do they have like vertical agriculture? Do they have indoor agriculture? Because that's a way as like a plan B to make sure that you have an emergency food source when something happens outdoors as well, right? So it's like thinking about how you can plan for different scenarios.
Yeah. One other thing, you know, when I was a kid, these issues were talked about, things about, you know, grow and eat locally. And I never really took much heed on it. Frankly, it never really impacted what I chose when I went to the grocery store. And now that I'm older, when you get foods that are grown locally, they taste so much better because they're fresher. So like every year for our classes in Ontario today, if you get Ontario strawberries versus strawberries that come from South America or the Southern United States, they're so much tastier because they were grown right down the street. And it makes it a better food experience in so many ways too, which I think does help people when it comes to making decisions like this. So great question, guys.
Yeah.
We're whipping through these. We're going to go back to our live classes in a second. Davis and St. Agnes, feel free to leave your devices on. You're in the background, so we can't hear you till we bring you in. But I love this question from Sonia in Mr. Moore's class in Ottawa. She wants to know, do a lot of countries rely on importing foods to feed their population?
Yes, 100%. A lot of countries do rely on food imported from other countries. And that's also because, you know, it makes sense, right? We like varieties, especially in urban centers. You know, we like to have sushi, you know, and we like to have chocolate and bananas and all of these things. And obviously, depending on where you live, not all of these produce are available. The thing is, we need to kind of have it balanced, right? So yes, it makes sense for us to occasionally eat things that can be grown here, but it's also important to support seasonality. So when I was growing up in Indonesia, there's a mango season, and during the mango season, you definitely eat up all the mangoes. You may put mangoes in everything, ice cream, dishes, desserts. But then when the mango season stops, you kind of change to other fruits that are available. So I think the problem here is that we are kind of out of balance, right? So it makes sense to import food, but I think that it can't be done while also like neglecting the local food and seasonality. I think that's a big thing.
I moved from Toronto to the Niagara region, so there's tons of fresh fruits available around me all year long, and they cycle every month or so, and it's been such a difference in my whole life. So I love that you brought that up. You know, one of the things that we get in a lot of our conservation programs, the increasing message, no matter whether people are in Australia or East Africa or Canada, the US, is make positive decisions when you're buying things, whether that's materials for yourself, clothing, whether it's a car, whether it's food. That can go a really long way to helping protect people and animal livelihoods around the world. So I'm really glad we're getting this message in. All right, Mr. Sinclair, I'm coming to you guys next live, but I love this question from Ms. McCool's class. It's a little longer. Wondering how schools can be home to vertical gardening. So you talked about this briefly, and it's a really cool concept. Open spaces students, they have everything. They have all the passion. What can they do? Is there any resource you'd recommend to get them on the way?
Oh my goodness, that is such a great question. You know, the experiences that I've seen are usually in universities, because a lot of universities have created like living and learning labs where they do vertical agriculture, they do hydroponics or aquaponics indoors, you know, so there are a lot of resources. I think the one thing that you might want to check is if you have a farm to school program in your state or province. I'm not sure where that question is coming from, because Farm to School Canada and Farm to Cafeteria Canada, they have a lot of resources on food growing, on school food, food literacy in general. So definitely check that out. But it is possible, because I've seen it with my very own eyes. And when I was at University of Toronto, we actually had a little aquaponic hydroponic device that students developed. So it is definitely possible, and you can use that as a learning opportunity. So like a learning lab or a living lab. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. I just brought up the farmtocafeteria.ca for the Canadian classrooms. I'm going to try and find an American example as we're chatting here for our class. Speaking of the US, let's go back to Mr. Sinclair. Thanks so much, and come on up again.
Can eating insects help with a food apocalypse?
Ooh, that is a great question. Can eating insects help with the food apocalypse? Yes, in a lot of countries, people are already eating insects anyway. In fact, when I was grocery shopping, I actually saw cricket powder, like cricket flour and cricket granola bars. So the thing is, you know, some of us eat meat, a lot of meat for the protein, but it's not always the most sustainable to eat too much meat. And so this is where insects can actually help, because they grow really fast. They don't need a lot of food. They don't need a lot of land to survive. And many different countries are already eating insects like grasshoppers or crickets. I know in Mexico, there's a lot of cricket dishes. So yeah, in Canada, there's already a lot of cricket products like granola bars and flour. That is one of the solution, is to kind of diversify.
I'm really glad we got that question. I was hoping we were going to get it through at the broadcast. So way to go, Mr. Sinclair's class. I do want to highlight farmtoschool.org as our American counterpart. So whether you're in Canada or the US, both of those resources are on our YouTube channel now and in the broadcast if you want to check it out and watch later. Yeah. Let's go back to St. Agnes, Waterloo, 7/8. Unmute your mic, turn on your camera, and you are good to go to ask a second question. Take a second to do that.
I don't think we actually have a second question.
That's okay. Hey, I'm so glad you're tuning in, and I hope you're getting a lot out of it. But if you do, just let me know in the chat bar, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Davis 7/8. How about you guys? Any questions in Davis? Feel free to turn on your camera as well. Coming. There we are. Hi, guys.
Hi. I'm curious as to the amount of people that are no longer meat eaters, and how, or if there are predictions for the next 10, 20 years and what that looks like.
The number of people, I don't know 100% the stats for the number of people who are not meat eaters. I know that plant-based eating is definitely growing, and so that is definitely a big trend. Now, there's also a big trend with plant-based alternative. Also, there's even this new science around lab-grown meat. So meat that is grown in a lab, and it's not even using animals. So it's not at the stage where it's in the supermarket yet. I think people are still kind of like, oh my goodness, lab grown meat, like what is that going to look like, how is it going to taste like? But I think the consensus is that for countries that have such a high meat consumption, it's important to reduce the meat consumption. But then there are other countries where really, you know, the way that they eat meat is very sustainable, it's not too much, and there's not a lot of waste going on. So it's really the factory farming that we really need to be concerned concern about because it emits a lot of greenhouse gas, methane, and all of these other things that's really not good for climate change.
Yeah. Is it true to say, I mean, I've heard it mentioned in other things before, books and podcasts and other things, if people shifted to more of a plant-based diet, that would be probably the single biggest impact they could have in terms of emissions, in terms of all sorts of things. Is that true in your experience, or from a food systems perspective?
I think it's definitely one of them. I also think that it's important to ask questions about the how, right? So how is the animal raised and grown? There's a big difference with factory farm animals and animals that are grown on free range and small scale agriculture, regenerative farming. And also I would say that, I work a lot with remote indigenous communities, and really when communities eat meat like salmon or moose, it's really their not only their identity, but it's like their source of survival. And eating tofu from Indonesia or something like that, it would not make sense. So it's really place-based. So depending on your place, it makes sense to tailor what you're doing based on your geography, basically.
Excellent. I'm so glad we keep harping on that message. If kids take away one thing from this, wherever you're joining from, that's a really, really important thing. We are ripping through this. Time flies and you're having fun. We've got time for a few more questions. Some great ones have just come in on YouTube. So SDG warriors want to know about genetic modifications. Can we make food hardier through those sort of technological advances?
Ooh, can we make food hardy by genetic modifications? So genetic modification is not my area of expertise. I think there's a lot of research going on. I think that, okay, it depends, right? So I know that there are cases where the plants or the crops can be hardier, but then depending on how it's grown in the region, it's not always suitable. So it's really also about like, well, is it suitable in that particular country? So the one thing I think with genetic modification is a lot more research is happening, and I think that the research is ongoing in terms of like whether it be like hardier for pests or hardier for the weather, like drought tolerant plants. I think there needs to be a mix of continuing science and research on genetically modified food, but also thinking about what kinds of heritage seeds are able to actually be drought tolerant as well. And because the one big concern about genetic modification that I hear a lot from various scientists is the cost, right? So I think that if you can develop a food that is hardy through genetic modification, but then the cost issue is addressed, that might also help people better access it. I think the cost is a big deal right now. That means that farmers always continuously have to purchase a lot, and they can't necessarily always save their seed. So that is the biggest tension right now when it comes to genetically modified food. Yeah,
I'm really happy we got this question. So one of our programs about a couple months back now, Rodolphe Berengu is a famous CRISPR scientist, one of the Gardner laureates actually, who's sponsoring these broadcasts, did an amazing job talking about food and CRISPR and genetic modification. The overwhelming consensus seems to be is that there's some business difficulties with it, like Tammara was mentioning, in terms of cost. The safety of it has been proven again and again and again over the last 30 years. When you genetically modify things, they are not dangerous in any way. They're not harmful. This is a really important thing as we deal with a lot of misinformation in other fields, to highlight the fact that in terms of safety, in terms of eating it, that has been proven for many, many decades now. And there's a lot of opportunities. And again, an important time to do a lot more research and make sure that we're good and getting things as healthy and hardy as humanly possible.
Yes.
Meredith, this has been great. We have time for one more question. I just want to wrap up with, in your experience, you've been doing this for quite some time now. Has there been a big, are we getting better as a society at dealing with these things and these issues? Are we getting worse? Is there room to grow? I mean, don't hold back if it's getting worse, but I'm curious what your opinions are.
Oh my goodness. Well, what we do know is that the inequality issue, the wealth disparity, is getting worse. So when that is definitely the case, is there hope? Is there innovation? Yes, definitely. There's a lot of exciting innovation, exciting collaboration all across the world, and I think social media is helping combine these communities that are interested in promoting food security and sustainable food system. So are there room to grow? Yes, for sure. And this is why it's so important, the work that you're doing in the school, the fact that you're actually coming here to listen to me. I hope that the teachers are the heroes. So if the teachers can teach students to care about their food, to learn more about food, be food literate, that will really help us, help me as a professor, and help the world in general, make the world a better place. So yeah, teachers are heroes.
Teachers are heroes. You guys rock. Thank you so much to our live classes and our YouTube classes for joining in today. Again, as you see in the background, this has all been made possible by the Gardner Foundation. So thank you to them for this entire month of programs. It's been so exciting to dive in with amazing people like you, Dr. Soma. And I'm so excited we get to finally have a chance to hang out. I want to highlight, you highlighted some great resources. So for all our classes, if you want to learn more about the Svalbard Seed Vault, say that 5 times fast, croptrust.org, an amazing thing. I love the Svalbard Seed Vault. It's very cool, even if I can't say it. Really neat stuff. If you want to email or get in touch with Tammara, please do. On Twitter, at Tammara Soma, foodsystemslab.ca. We've got some classes coming in on YouTube a little late now, but I really encourage classes to get in touch and share those with you. And then you highlighted the CEC's Food Matters Action Kit. Lots of great resources. If you guys are keen as a classroom to make a positive difference and to learn more, check that out. So much more to keep the excitement going. Tammara, is there a last message to wrap up the broadcast with? What do we want kids to finish this and go home with as they end their day with us?
I want you to love food. So love food, don't waste food. Okay? So love.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All our classes live and on YouTube. We'll end the